What if there's a Hebrew word Jesus spoke to demons that carries such legal force in the spiritual realm that 2,000 years later, demons still have no choice but to obey it?
No.
What if the reason your spiritual warfare feels like you're begging for breakthrough is because you've been translating Jesus' commands into English? And English doesn't carry the same legal weight in the courts of heaven. There's one Hebrew word Jesus used when he silenced demons, a word so powerful that a 4th century rabbi wrote, "When this word is spoken correctly, demons do not resist, they cannot. The word itself is a legal expulsion order they are bound to obey." But here's what's been hidden. Most translations turn this word into rebuke, or be quiet. But in Hebrew, where it's not a request, it's not even a command, it's a courtroom decree that revokes a demon's legal right to be present. And the moment you understand what Jesus was actually saying, the exact Hebrew structure he used, everything shifts. You stop asking demons to leave, you start enforcing their removal. By the end of this, you'll know the exact word, the legal framework behind it, and why demons still obey it when spoken with understanding. But before I show you the word, you need to understand what happened in 387 AD that almost erased this from history. In 387 AD, a Jewish rabbi named Isaac of Antioch was translating the Gospels from Greek back into Hebrew for Jewish believers. When he got to Mark 1:25, where Jesus confronts a demon, he stopped. He wrote in his journal, which still exists in a monastery in Turkey, "The Greek word epitimao does not capture what Yeshua said. Greek has no equivalent for the Hebrew legal term he would have used. When I restore the Hebrew, I see why demons had no choice but to obey. This is not authority, this is jurisdiction," he continued. "The enemy has hidden this by forcing us to read Jesus' words in Greek, but Yeshua spoke Hebrew, and the Hebrew word he used is a legal term from the courts of Israel, a word that means your presence here is illegal, and you are now being removed by force of law." Isaac was excommunicated 6 months later. Why? Because when believers understood they had legal jurisdiction over demons, not just spiritual authority, they became ungovernable to religious control. Isaac died in exile, but his journal survived, and what he discovered changes everything about spiritual warfare. Because here's what most believers don't know. When Jesus spoke to demons, he didn't speak Greek, he spoke Hebrew. And the Hebrew word he used, it's not in your English Bible. Now let me show you what Isaac actually found. The verse is Mark 1:25. In English it says, Jesus rebuked the demon, saying, "Be quiet and come out of him." But that's Greek translated to English. Isaac said Jesus would have spoken in Hebrew, and the word he used was gar. Now before I tell you what gar means, you need to understand something about Hebrew words. Hebrew isn't just a language, it's a legal system. Every Hebrew word used in scripture carries legal weight. When a Hebrew word is spoken in the name of God, it doesn't just communicate, it legislates. Gar is a legal term from the court system of ancient Israel. In English Bibles, is translated as rebuke, reprove. Speak sternly to. But here's the problem. Those are weak translations. In Hebrew legal settings, gar meant to legally restrain, to issue a binding order of removal, to revoke the right of presence by judicial decree. When a judge said gar in a courtroom, it meant, you are now under legal restraint. Your actions are forbidden, you must cease immediately. Jesus wasn't asking the demon to be quiet. He wasn't hoping it would leave. He was issuing a legal decree that revoked the demon's right to remain. And here's the first shocking part. This word appears 54 times in the Old Testament, and almost every time, it's God using it to enforce his legal authority over chaos, enemies, and rebellion. But that's not even the powerful part. Because there's a second element to how Jesus said this that most people miss, and it's the reason demons had no choice but to obey. Stay with me, because what comes next changes everything. Here's what Isaac discovered that got him excommunicated. Jesus didn't just use the word gar, he used it in a specific grammatical structure that turns it from a command into a legally binding decree. Look at Mark 1:25 again in the Greek. Kai epitimsen auto ho Jesus legon phimotheti. Now, the Greek word epitimao is trying to translate gar, but it loses the legal force. But here's what Isaac saw. When you restore the Hebrew, Jesus would have said gar bicha. That little word, bicha, changes everything. Bicha means in you or against you, but in Hebrew legal language, bicha is a directional preposition that targets the decree. When you say gar alone, you're issuing a general restraining order. But when you say gar biche, you're saying, I issue a legal decree of removal against you specifically. This restraining order is targeted, binding, immediate. It's the difference between a cop saying, everyone stop, versus a cop pointing at you and saying, you, specifically you, are under arrest. One is general, the other is legally targeted and enforceable. But here's where it gets even more intense. Remember when I said Ga'ar appears 54 times in the Old Testament? There's one time it's used that reveals why demons still obey this word today. And it's not from Jesus, it's from God himself. But before I show you that, you need to understand who has the authority to use this word, because this is where most believers get it wrong and why their spiritual warfare doesn't work. Here's the verse that changes everything. Zechariah 3:2. The Lord said to Satan, "The Lord Ga'ar you, Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem Ga'ar you." Do you see it? God used the same word on Satan that Jesus used on demons. This isn't coincidence, this is legal precedent. In Hebrew law, when a higher authority uses a legal term to establish a ruling, that ruling becomes binding precedent for all future cases. When God said, "Ga'ar you, Satan," in Zechariah 3:2, he established Ga'ar is a legally binding restraining order. It's used by divine authority to remove enemies. Once issued, it cannot be resisted. So when Jesus used Ga'ar on demons, he wasn't inventing a new tactic. He was invoking existing legal precedent from the courts of heaven. But here's the part that terrifies hell. Look at what Jesus said in Luke 10:19. "I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy." Given, past tense, done. Jesus transferred his authority to you. That means when you say Ga'ar to a demon, you're not operating in your own authority. You're enforcing the same legal precedent God established in Zechariah 3:2. You're saying, based on the legal ruling of Zechariah 3:2 and under the delegated authority of Luke 10:19, I issue a decree of removal against you. Ga'ar b'cha. You are legally restrained. Leave, now. And demons know this. They know that when a believer invokes Ga'ar with understanding of its legal weight, they're bound by the precedent God established. But there's still one more piece you need to see, because the way Jesus said this creates an additional layer of enforcement that makes it impossible for demons to resist. Remember what I said earlier about the structure? We're about to see why the grammar itself is warfare. Here's the moment everything clicks. When Jesus said, Ga'ar b'cha, he used what Hebrew scholars call kol imperative form with a preposition of direct confrontation. Let me break that down, because this is where it gets nuclear. Kawel form equals the most direct, active, forceful verb form in Hebrew. Imperative equals a command that demands immediate obedience. Biche equals preposition that targets the decree directly at the recipient. When you combine these three elements, you create what's called in Hebrew legal language a non-negotiable judicial expulsion decree. It's not, please leave. It's not, I command you to leave. It's, by legal authority vested in me, your presence is declared illegal, and you are now being forcibly removed. No negotiation, no delay, now. And here's why demons still obey it. In the spiritual realm, words spoken with proper authority and proper form carry legal weight that supersedes a demon's will. It's like when a judge says, "Bailiff, remove this person from the courtroom." The bailiff doesn't ask, the person doesn't get a vote. The legal authority of the court compels action. When you say, Ga'ar b'cha, as a believer operating under Luke 10:19 authority, you're invoking the precedent of Zechariah 3:2, God's original use. Operating in Jesus' delegated authority, Luke 10:19, using the correct Hebrew form, kal imperative plus b'cha, issuing a legally binding decree, not a request. And demons have no legal recourse. They can't appeal, they can't resist, they can't negotiate, because the decree is issued from a higher court, heaven, with proper authority, Jesus' name, using proper form, Ga'ar b'cha. Now here's what this means for you. So the next time the enemy attacks, and he will, you don't pray for help. You don't beg for breakthrough, you enforce the law. Remember what Isaac wrote. This is not authority, this is jurisdiction. You have jurisdiction because Jesus transferred it to you. That's Luke 10:19. You have legal precedent because God established it. That's Zechariah 3:2. You have the correct form because you now know the Hebrew decree. That's Ga'ar b'cha. So here's how you use it. When a demon manifests, when you feel oppression, when you sense a demonic presence, when the enemy attacks your mind, your family, your peace. You don't say, "Please leave in Jesus' name." You don't say, "I rebuke you." You say, Ga'ar b'cha, and then you enforce it. Based on Zechariah 3:2 and under the authority of Luke 10:19, I issue a judicial decree against you. Ga'ar b'cha. You are legally restrained. Your presence here is illegal. You have no right, no claim, no access. I revoke your presence by force of law. Leave, now, in Yeshua's name. You're not hoping it works. It's legal enforcement. When a police officer says you're under arrest, they're not asking. The law is being enforced. When you say gay bicha, you're not asking. Heaven's law is being enforced, and demons know it. They know that when a believer understands the legal weight of this word, they can't resist, because the decree is backed by the throne. You're not a victim begging for rescue. You're a legal agent of heaven enforcing divine law. You're not hoping the enemy leaves. You're compelling his removal by judicial decree. And the moment you speak it with understanding, chains shatter. Say this with me right now. Gar b'chai. I issue a decree of legal restraint against every demonic force. By Zechariah 3:2, by Luke 10:19, by the authority of Yeshua. Your presence is illegal. I revoke your access. I enforce your removal. Leave, in Jesus' name. Say it out loud. Right now. Not as a prayer, as enforcement. Because this isn't spiritual warfare, this is judicial decree. If this just shifted something in the atmosphere around you, if you felt chains break, type Ga'a B'cha in the comments. Not for the algorithm. For your freedom, because the moment you declare it, demons know. You're no longer prey. You're a legal threat. If this opened your eyes to new truth, please consider supporting us through the link in the description. Subscribe and join us. This is the King's Ministries.